Hi everyone, my name's Catherine Pilkington and I'm a teaching and learning consultant for primary English and literacy at Lancashire Professional Development Service. This vlog today is all about providing you with some top tips and signposting you to some useful documents to help you secure independent writing outcomes at Key Stage 2. Okay, so let's have a look at some modelled and independent writing opportunities throughout a unit of work. As I'm sure many of you are aware, this is our teaching sequence. This is our model of best practice. Reading informs writing, underpinned by quality spoken language outcomes. What we are looking for along the way within our units are some shorter, independent writing opportunities for children. Each unit will culminate in some extended writing opportunities. Outcome 1, which is the modelled extended outcome. Outcome 2, which is the independent extended outcome. And sometimes, if you can, and this is more normal with your non-fiction outcomes, a wider curriculum independent outcome. We also want to see these short and extended pieces of writing focused very carefully on age-appropriate writing skills. So we would suggest a daily key skills warm-up. Now, this is the same representation, but we've just presented this as a planning backwards grid, which we know a lot of people are using. So again, you can see we've got our independent write at the end there, our outcome 2. Before that, we can plan our modelled scaffolded write. Then we've got a few days for our gathering content. We've got our planning session and we've got our reading phase planned in there. And then you can see dripped through, we've got those lovely grammar starters to make sure children have got lots and plenty of opportunity to practice those age-appropriate skills. So let's have a little look at a bit of context. This is taken from our Talk 4 programme using this gorgeous book, The Last Bear by Hannah Gold. And this is the unit on story openings. So let's take a look at some shorter writing opportunities within the teaching sequence. So you can see we are starting off here by looking at the character of April. And do remember, when you see those grey strap lines at the top of the page, they are taken directly from our key learning documents. So here we've got young girl April. We're going to have a little look at the image and some relevant extracts from the text. We're going to make some notes following a discussion, and we're going to add these notes to the working wall in the form of a roll on the wall. Okay, so we can start off by doing that. And once we've facilitated that class discussion and we've got lots of those sticky notes up on the wall, then we might ask children to record what they know about April in terms of details about her and on the theme of loneliness in a roll on the wall in their own books. So you can see we've widened that picture slightly. So now we haven't just got April, we've also got somebody who we presume to be Dad. And then you can see a real life example here of a roll on the wall taken from a child's book where they've had a little look at what we know about April and the theme of loneliness. So we can see there she's curious, she wants to know, she's anxious, she is scared. So lots of lovely details on there. The next day, we might develop that into a modelled shorter writing opportunity. And you can see that we have been using there our reading domain prompts, reading domain question prompts there. Those are on our website. And we are focusing in on inference and backing up our points with some evidence. So you can see the question that we have posed is, what evidence is there that April is lonely in chapter 1? Now, obviously, we've got all of those notes up on the roll on the wall. The children have got their rolls on the wall in their books. And so again, following discussion, the teacher can do a shorter modelled writing opportunity on what evidence is there that April is lonely in chapter 1. And you can see that modelled writing opportunity there. The following day, we will want the children to do another short writing opportunity, but this time to provide us with some independent evidence. So you can see we have used exactly the same reading domain key prompt. What evidence is there that April is lonely in chapters 2 and 3? So today we will obviously provide the children with some time, and they will do some paired and some independent reading of chapters 2 and 3. Following that, they can discuss with their talk partners, they can collect some extra notes, they might go on the roll on the wall, and following that discussion, the children can then formulate and articulate their independent writing outcome based on the same point. Okay, let's now take a look at some extended rights, both modelled and independent. So the unit I've chosen to exemplify here is one of our lovely Year 3 units based on the classic text Ted Hughes's Iron Man. Now you can see here we've jumped straight to the planning of the story. It's really important that obviously you teach children and model how to plan, because planning is a real skill. Now you can see we've got the original plot of the Iron Man, we've got the basic plot extracted, and then we've got the new story that the children are plotting here. And of course, as a teacher, you would have your own copy of that plan, showing the children how to select choices ready for your modelled outcome. Now, the children actually had 2 planning sheets for this one, because part of the story is considering how the Iron Man might be trapped. So as part of the gathering content, you can see there, the children were generating ideas on how they might trap the Iron Man. And it's important, isn't it, that they've got a few choices there. So there are sufficient choices for children to select from for their modelled outcome and for their independent. So once they've done that and they've selected their choices, we then go in to that model scaffolded right that's done over a few days. So you can see here, this is the first paragraph of that modelled right. So obviously the teacher is modelling writing on the board and showing the children how to use adverbs effectively in an opening paragraph. And then off the children go and write their own paragraph based on their own story. The following day, the teacher will model how to do the next paragraph. Again, keeping on referring back to that plan, showing the children how to use adverbs and conjunctions, and of course, modeling that editing process along the way. The following day, the teacher will model the third paragraph of the story, again, demonstrating how to include complex sentences and adverbs, and then off the children will go and follow their own plan for their next paragraph, and so on. So there's the 4th paragraph for the next day, and then finally the 5th paragraph. So that's really clear to see how that modelling process works. The teacher will model, and of course it will be a shared write, flip chart and paper, talking through those thought processes. The teacher will model their chunk, off the children will go and do theirs. And that will repeat over a few days. Now, before we have a look at outcome 2, our extended independent outcome, it will be useful to consider the STA Key Stage 2 Teacher Assessment Guidance for 23-24. We would recommend taking on this guidance as a model of good practice across the school. If everybody is following this guidance, then you know that approaches to independent writing are consistent right across your school. So let's see what it says. Writing is likely to be independent if it emerges from a text, topic, visit, or curriculum experience in which pupils have had opportunities to discuss and rehearse what is to be written about. So really good there, because it says you don't need to do cold writing. It needs to be something that the children have been immersed in, whether that is a quality text or whether it's a visit. But we think that's a really good piece of guidance. And also, again, by the fact it is underpinned by discussion. The children should have had opportunities to discuss and rehearse what is to be written about. Writing is independent if it enables pupils to use their own ideas and provides them with an element of choice. And again, we spoke about that before, didn't we? Making sure you've got your choices up on your working wall so that the children can select from those. Writing is independent if it's been edited, if required, by the pupil without the support of the teacher, although this may be in response to self, peer, or group evaluation. So as a teacher, you can't direct the children on what needs changing, but they can read it aloud to their peers and decide amongst themselves. And writing is also independent if it's produced by pupils who have, if required, sought out classroom resources such as a dictionary or thesaurus without being prompted to do so by the teacher. And again, hopefully, that is part of your daily classroom culture. Discussing words, looking for synonyms, looking up definitions in dictionaries, word maps, and all those wonderful things. If you are modelling how to do that and the children know where they can access those resources, if they are choosing to access those resources during an independent write, then that is absolutely fine. Again, as long as they're not being prompted to do so by the teacher. Okay. Writing is not independent if it has been modelled or heavily scaffolded. But of course, it's really important to go through the modelling process so that children can see the teacher as a writer and can obviously gain valuable skills from that. Writing is not independent if it's being copied or paraphrased, including producing work that demonstrates an over-reliance on a model text. Writing is not independent if it's been edited or rewritten because of direct intervention by a teacher or other adult. For example, when the pupil has been directed to change specific words for greater impact, where incorrect or omitted punctuation has been indicated, or when incorrectly spelt words have been identified by an adult for the pupil to correct. Writing is not independent if it's being produced with the support of electronic aids that automatically provide correct spelling, synonyms, punctuation, or predictive text. If the electronic aid is turned off, this would be considered independent. So if you have got children who need to type up, or if you've done a particular piece of work that lends itself to being typed up, then that's absolutely fine. But if you want to judge it as being independent, just make sure the spelling and grammar checks are turned off on those. And writing is not independent if it's supported by detailed success criteria that specifically direct pupils what to include or where to include it in their writing, such as directing them to include specific vocabulary, grammatical features, or punctuation. So I've just put a little example of a success criteria in here because we do not want to go against that guidance. So we need to be very careful with our success criteria so that we are not directing pupils what to include or where to include it. So you can see I've got some samples of success criteria here that have been included with children's independent work because you can see the success criteria are quite loose. It doesn't specify exactly what the children, what we want the children to include, but it says things like interesting openers, a variety of sentences, descriptive detail, accurate punctuation, best presentation, and consistent tense. So that's quite loose, and that is okay for success criteria in your independent outcomes. And finally, before we move on, there's just one new paragraph included in the STA guidance that says schools that subscribe to writing schemes or frameworks should ensure that pupils are given enough opportunities to produce independent pieces of writing in line with the guidance above. Also, schools should consider that they are able to provide evidence that writing is independent and fulfills pupil can statements. So if you are a school that subscribes to writing schemes or framework, it is worth having a look and just considering, are your pupils being given sufficient opportunity to produce independent writing outcomes? Okay, so now let's have a look at the extended independent outcome that was produced in line with those STA guidelines. And we call this outcome 2, not too new, because the children will be using the same plan and going back and making some different choices from that gathering content phase. So you can see that this child has got exactly the same plan as they had for the modelled right for outcome 1, but they have made different choices in that right-hand column. Again, there are 2 planning sheets for outcome 2 because the children have selected their choices and popped those in that right-hand column, but they're also inventing a new character for the story. So obviously the original was based on the Iron Man. The children were then given choices, so they could have an iron bird, an iron giant, or an iron beast. And you can see that this child has decided to create a lovely iron bird. And you can see there, in terms of those labelled descriptions, you can see that child really drawing on what they've read as a model for their own writing, and that's lovely to see. And then off we go with outcome 2, remembering there will be no teacher modelling in this session, which is why this one is just done over a couple of days. So you can see here that we've got a couple of paragraphs, then we've got a new short date in the margin, and the child continues until they have finished. Okay, so it's the same amount of paragraphs as outcome 1, but because there is no teacher modelling, obviously we don't need to do that over as many days. So that one was just done over 2 days. So what we thought it might be useful to do was just to clear up some misconceptions that we have heard around independent writing. And it might be a good idea, obviously, to share these back at school just to identify any misconceptions around this area. So misconception 1, we only model writing until the end of January in year 6. Everything else from then on is independent. Now, do we think that's a good idea or not? We think it would be very unwise not to model after January in year 6, because obviously children really need those models of writing to understand the thought processes the authors go through when they compose a good piece of writing. So please don't stop modeling in year 6. We model one sentence at a time. The children then complete their own sentence independently. Now, that's a misconception because obviously the teacher has modelled it just before the children have gone away and wrote their own. So even if the child has changed that sentence slightly, it's not independent because it's just been modelled in the same session. We model a story in sections. Children write their own version after each section, then edit and publish in their independent book. So again, we need to be very careful with this one. It's blurring the lines a little bit. So the story has been modelled, which was the good practice that I've just exemplified in terms of that modelled right, and the children write their own section. That's fine. But then the children take the same piece of writing, so the same modelled right, and edit and publish it in their independent book. So that's not true independent writing, is it? Because that's the piece that the children have seen modelled. We ask the children to write their own version of a narrative or non-fiction, provide teacher feedback, then they improve and publish. So again, do you remember that STA guidance? We can't direct children what to include or where to include it if we want to use it as independent evidence. And that's what that teacher's done. They've given the children feedback, then the children have improved and published it as independent. So that's not following those guidelines. And finally, I model a piece of writing, a shared right. I leave it on the flip chart and children write their own independently in the same lesson. So again, we can't class that as independent because there's been some teacher modelling going on in that session. So that's why in all of our examples, we've done the modelled example where we've done some changes and the children have gone away and had a little go at theirs. But then our independent outcomes have been produced the next day with no teacher modelling within that session. And finally, I thought it would just be helpful to end with a few key useful documents that might be able to support you with your independent writing outcomes back at school. So you may remember this document we produced a while ago, which was the key learning in reading and writing linked to the teacher assessment frameworks. So you can see here, we've got those statements from the teacher assessment frameworks at Key Stage 2. And what we've done is match them up with the appropriate statements from the key learning in writing document. So if I just take one as an example, we know in Year 6, the children are expected to integrate dialogue in narratives to convey character and advance the action. Now, that's quite a tricky skill. So what we need to make sure that we're doing is making sure the children are building up those skills in integrating dialogue progressively. So in our key learning statements in Year 3, that's when the children are introduced to inverted commas. So children use inverted commas to punctuate direct speech. In Year 4, children use inverted commas and other punctuation to indicate direct speech. In Year 5, we can begin blending action, dialogue, and description so that by the end of Year 6, children are able to integrate dialogue in narratives to convey character and advance the action. So we feel that that's a really helpful document in helping all Key Stage 2 staff members to be really fully aware of which skills that need to be taught to build up to those end of Key Stage 2 assessments in writing. You will obviously be carefully considering which grammar skills you are going to teach, making sure they are well matched and appropriate to the unit that you are doing. If you would like some advice on grammar and on making sure that children's sentences are exciting and are age appropriate, then it might be a good idea to have a little look at our brand new primary sentence toolkit. Now, there's some excellent examples in there. There's an explanation of the I model, if that's something that you are using at school. There are also some examples of the I model. And then there are sections on lots of things that might help children. So just going back to the example that I looked at about the speech and dialogue, section 7 is in fact focused on speech and speech punctuation, starting with a little bit of subject knowledge and key learning. Then we've got a unit on speech and speech punctuation and a unit on blending action, dialogue and description. And in there are some fantastic and exciting games which really might help children to understand and to be able to integrate dialogue really effectively within their independent writing. So I've popped the link there to our website so you can have a little look at that primary sentence toolkit. Another few things that you might want to consider, we have got a new English unit planning framework. Again, I've popped the link at the bottom there. So you can see there just how much detail we've got on the front cover of our unit plan. So you can see we are considering how long we're going to spend on our unit. We've got our core text and our supplementary texts in there. Then we've got a space for your key learning in reading, writing and spoken language. Of course, you can pop on your grammar skills there for your warm-ups or your I model as well. Then on the front cover, we've got space so that you can plan your outcome 1, your modelled, your outcome 2, your independent outcome 3 if applicable, but also there's a space for those shorter writing opportunities across the unit. And then as we move through that planning document, you can see there's also a planning backwards grid that can be edited and utilised by staff. And then obviously we've got it talking through our reading phase, our reading and analysing phase, right the way through to gathering content and writing. So again, if that's something that you think might be helpful for your school, do head over to the website and download a copy of that. And just two more things that you might find useful. We have produced this new writing health check. Again, this is available on our website. The link is at the bottom there. This has been created by ourselves to support auditing and evaluating the writing curriculum back at your school setting. Now, the section I just wanted to draw your attention to today, in light of today's vlog, was the independent writing section. So again, this might be helpful to facilitate discussions and make notes back at school to see where you are in terms of independent writing. So are independent writing outcomes coherently planned within and at the end of units of work? Do independent writing opportunities follow earlier modelled opportunities, either earlier in the sequence or in a recent prior sequence? Is there a balance of shorter and extended independent pieces relating to a range of purposes and audiences across school? How are independent opportunities set up? Do they reflect the independent writing guidance outlined in the teacher assessment guidance provided by STA? Is success criteria used to support independent writing? If so, does it reflect the guidance outlined in the teacher assessment guidance provided by the STA? And how are children supported to develop independent editing and proofreading skills? And the very last thing is that obviously we have got a whole range of blogs available on our website. So there is a catalogue there, but if you do head over to the link, you can access all of those blogs free of charge. And again, it might be worth having a look through those, prioritising which areas you feel would support your school practice at the moment, and you can show those as free sound bites of CPD back at school. So I hope you found today's vlog useful. We'd like to wish you all the best with your independent writing opportunities back at school, and we hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.